that I've been muted this whole time. Could you hear me just now? Yeah, okay, awesome, great. So we're live. And what I was just saying was that I was sitting here waiting for us to start. I was eating my salad, being responsible, because I have a goal of eating at least one meal a day this year. Don't ask questions, we'll talk about that later. And I couldn't figure out why I felt so something wasn't right. I just couldn't get. I just was not. I don't even have the words. I don't have the words. Chris, maybe you can help me. But I did not have the words, and I was trying to do something different this time, right? Because usually, whenever I'm doing something public, even if it's virtual, whatever it is, I have to get fully dressed. Like, you know how some people can like just get dressed from the waist up, you know, whether it's like a work thing, you're working from home, you can just get dressed from the waist up and you're good because nobody's gonna see the bottom half, right? Unless you stand up, do something wild. I can't do that. I have to be like fully dressed. Also, I haven't finished dressing if I haven't put on perfume. Can anybody smell it? No, you can't smell my perfume through the screen. I can smell it, even for first 15 minutes, then I'm sometimes going nose blind, but I can't do it. Like, I just can't do it. I used to be the same way with like earrings a long time ago. The only reason I don't have them on now is because my headphones. Well, anyways, couldn't figure out why I was like uncomfortable. And then I realized I can't do this. I can't do the thing that like normal, typical people do where you can just get dressed from the waist up. Couldn't do it. So I had to go get the pants that I was wearing instead of my shorts and finished getting dressed. And why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because I feel like this has a lot to do with the conversation that we're going to be having today, what we're going to be talking about. And it's something that I really didn't realize, it didn't fully click until just now. I was texting Krista, our guest here, who I'm going to introduce in a second. And that's kind of been the nature of the last, I don't know, year, 18 months, 2 years, maybe like the last year and a half. It's just me realizing all of these things about myself, things that I knew, but sort of making sense of them. And so I was like, okay, let me just share it. Instead of like, doing some sappy like hook that's relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. Just wanted to share that little anecdote because it's a really good example of what the last like year of my life has been like, especially since I got some changes in diagnoses. Now, for those who don't know, I was diagnosed with my chronic illness, the genetic blood disorder that I have. I was diagnosed at 2 days old. And so I've always had that diagnosis. And so it's very complex and it comes with a lot of comorbidities. So I've had a lot of diagnoses over the years. But for probably a number of reasons, this particular diagnosis that I got last year, I did not see coming. I wouldn't have guessed in a million years. And it has really shaken up a lot of things for me. It's shaken up my life in a lot of strange ways and a lot of, like I said, ways that I didn't expect. I'm kind of like word salading, word vomiting right now. But that's what we're going to be talking about today because it really has everything to do with, where we've been the last almost year now, I think. So anyways, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Smalls. So what up, y'all? Smalls here. I'm coming to you from Chumash and Tongva land. That's here in Southern California. And this is Black and Sick, where we explore the intersection of culture and faith. And we're going to be expanding those intersections and talking about a number of things: culture, faith, gender, race, all kind of things, and really leaning into advocacy, which was really the purpose of Black and Sick to begin with, at least one of the purposes. The other was to sort of create a community for Black Sicks. And so we're going to be expanding on that and doing a lot more of that. And like I said, leaning into the advocacy of it all. So I brought a guest. We have a guest here today. And the reason that I wanted to come back and start season 2 with this particular guest is because she has been witness to like the last year or so, the last 18 months, what I was just talking about, of everything that has transpired, and has also had a sort of parallel experience. I won't say it's the same, right? We live very different lives, but certainly parallels. And I think she can speak to it more than anything. Also, I am somebody who's like a verbal processor. I have to process things out loud. And I'm always trying to get different perspectives, right? So I have my perspective looking from the inside out. They say there are 3 versions of each of us, right? The version that we see, the version that other people see, and then our true selves, right? And if that's true, then that means all of us have blind spots. It means all of us have a version of ourselves that even we are not privy to, that even we don't see, at least not wholly, not 100% accurately, right? And so I've always been somebody who likes to get outside perspectives. I think self-awareness is important, and that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. But before I go any further, I want to let Krista introduce herself, and then we'll get into what we're here to talk about today. So how would you, Krista, if you want to unmute yourself, introduce yourself to the people, tell us what you think we need to know, at least starting off this conversation.
Well, first of all, I'm coming to you live here from Dallas, Texas. What can I tell you about myself? Momtrepreneur, speaker, wealth strategist. I've been running an insurance company for the last decade, women's financial empowerment advocate, and somebody who's just really trying to figure out the puzzles of my health, of my mindset, and trying to help my kids navigate those same puzzles at the same time. So it's been a whirlwind, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I think that was a great description. I knew all those things, but it's always interesting to find out how other people see themselves, what things about themselves that they prioritize. So I always like to let guests introduce themselves. Okay, so first things first, because I don't want us, I can be long-winded and get off track. So let me pull up our outline. I'm going to show, make sure we're staying on target. Let's start with a check-in. I try to start with a check-in as often as possible, whether it's I'm facilitating a support group or, just talking to friends. I always try to start with a check-in, just like a mental health check. How are you doing physically, mentally, spiritually, economically? I don't know, whatever you think you want to include. And I'll start. I'll just say, how am I doing? I'm all right. I'm in a season of self-discovery, I guess maybe we can call it. And so that has been a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I had this sort of revelation not too long ago that I think this is what life is. I think this is adulting. I think this is it. Right. I think some of us maybe leave. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I kind of just had this realization oh, this is life. Getting up every day, doing these things, adulting, taking care of what you need to take care of, handling your responsibilities, going through ups, going through that, this is life, right? And so that's been sort of a relief and also depressing, maybe a little bit. I don't know, but that's how I'm doing. I'm a little bit all over the place, up, down, a little bit hopeful, a little bit relieved, a little bit confused. But right now, I think I'm at a stasis point. I'm all right. Things are all right. I think it's interesting. I have multiple medical appointments every week. It's rare that I go a week without having a doctor's appointment of some sort. And I remember my main doctor, my primary doctor, being like, "Oh, you're on it. You're of all my patients, you're on it. You handle your business. You got it together." And I was so confused because I'm girl, what the fuck are you talking about? Who's on what in what world do I have it together? And what I realized is that's what people see, right? That's the perception that people have, or maybe not people, but certainly that's the perception that she has. And I was oh girl, no, you didn't see what it took to get here on time today. No. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. My stasis is sort of smooth on the surface, like a duck on the water, but underneath I'm just trying to keep my head above water, just trying to survive. So that's about where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So relatable.
Yeah. So, but what about you? How you doing?
I would say about the same. You caught me in my luteal phase, so I am alternating between the depressive fog and the crazy lady and the get it all done executive and the curled in fetal position in my closet on the floor. So I'm a little bit all over the place. It's always interesting. My birthday month of April comes with certain expectations, but also certain disappointments and just a whirlwind of activity between the kids' health, my health, and just getting it all done and feeling like there's never enough hours, there's never enough spoons, none of it. So,
Oh
but
yeah.
overall, I'm good. I'm here.
Yeah, you want to talk about relatable. Yeah, I feel that. Minus the kids part. Say that again.
I said, no, you're right. Minus the kids.
Yeah, minus the kids part. I finally got a female OBGYN, and so that is official now. No kids. Let me at least say no, I will not be procreating. Let me say that. I will not be carrying any kids. Thank God. I remember in the 7th grade, I came home after school one day and I was like, Mom, I need you. Don't expect grandkids. I'm an only child. Don't expect grandkids. I'm not doing that. I don't want. And at the time she was like, yeah, no, totally fine. Yeah, that's great. And then like, a couple decades later, she was like, I kind of want grandkids. And I was like, you have them, they're your step grandkids. Enjoy them. Because those are the only ones you're getting. And I still feel the same about that. I said it in college and my OBGYN at the time was like, but what about your husband? And I said, what about him? Where is he? Does he exist? Anyways, I'm getting off track. Tangents. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about a number of things. When we last left off, we were talking about neurodivergence and or particularly the intersection of being neurodivergent and Black and woman and queer and a number of other things. And so we're going to actually pick up that conversation where we left off. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about, like where we've been, what happened to Black and Sick, what's going on, because we took this sabbatical last April. We went on like a planned sabbatical, and it was just to regroup, to like sort of scale back our workload after we had some like team member changes, and to ultimately like refine our mission to figure out, like the purpose of Black and Sick, what we want to do, the things we want to achieve, what we want to accomplish, what we want this space and this whatever you want to call it, this brand to be, right? And so initially that sabbatical was only supposed to last for a month, but then like a couple weeks in, life started lifing for everybody, right? For like the entire team, like one by one, folks, stuff started happening, started taking team members out left and right. And so I was like, okay, we just need to like pause for a second, because one thing I know for sure is like people come first. I've always believed that. That's how I feel, and I will not feel bad about that. And so even coming back now, this second season, as we're calling it, of Black and Sick, we will show up when we show up. We'll be here when we're here, right? Because the first priority is staying healthy and staying well, and that's not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, all of that, right? And so during that sabbatical, my already like complex and like ever precarious mental health situation, my physical health situation, it got even more complicated. I had to have a major surgery, and then I found out I have 2 more surgeries coming up. And so things just got like real wild. And so luckily Krista, we've been friends for a long time now. And so I asked Krista if she would come and like be there during my surgery and just kind of like help me out. I really wanted to just make sure somebody was like at the hospital with eyes on medical team, medical staff, like eyes on what was happening if I had to go under. And a lot of that is just because of what I know about our healthcare system here in the US. And so graciously, she did that. And what I realized, I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but what I realized during that time was, I don't know what I realized because I just had a brain fart. But anyway, so she was here and she's sort of like witnessing things happening, right? And then at some point during the hiatus, our, extra long sabbatical, I realized like if we were going to return to doing like Black and Sick, I was going to have to do it differently, right? Like I wasn't going to be making this schedule and having to stick to this thing and having this insane workload and blah, blah, blah. It was just going to have to be, things that I actually enjoy doing, things that I was excited to do, things that I didn't like sort of feel forced to do. And that includes editing videos. Like I hate editing videos. I know how to do it. I can do it. It's part of like what I did for work for a long time, but I hate doing it. So we're going to be mostly doing like live streams and live conversations. And that's really what I want season 2 to be mostly, is conversations with various people. And like I said, really leaning into advocacy. And that includes advocacy for Sikhs, not just Black Sikhs, but, religious minorities in general, but Sikhs in general. And so we're going to be talking to a number of people, from the healthcare system to religious advocates to advocates of like who were operating in the foster care system, like all kind of advocates. That's what we're really going to be focusing on for season 2. And I thought, instead of doing this like long long form video where we explain everything that happened and like, why'd you leave for almost a year and then come back? Instead of doing like this long winded video that was probably going to be boring, I would just give those updates throughout season 2. And so instead, we're just going to jump right into the conversation. And so today's conversation, or tonight's conversation rather, is it's about neurodivergence, autism. It's about faith and mental health and culture and religion and how all of those things come together to, you know, work out for a person or not work out for a person, or however you want to call it, right? Let me pause for a second. I just want to make sure. And okay, sweet. Okay, so here we go. So let's start off with talking about, we'll get into details about how we met, but how do you remember when we met? Like, do you remember when we first met? I remember. Like, you do? Okay. Tell me. I remember. Had I already pledged when we first met?
Yes, you had already pledged.
Okay, so
I want to say
it was at least 2000. So okay, so I was at least a junior, and we were at least juniors. Okay, so when did we meet, or what do you remember?
I want to say it was fall 2007, and it was at a house party at your house. And my boyfriend at the time, now husband, brought me to your house to introduce me to his circle of friends. Now I had just got to New Orleans. Brand new Cali girl, like a little bit nervous around Black people because I grew up in a very predominantly white neighborhood where I was the token Black kid. And in my introverted way, I put my earbuds in after I met everybody and I sat on the couch while he bartended.
Okay. So I do remember. I couldn't remember if that was our first meeting, but I do remember that very explicitly. And it, you know, it's strange. I don't remember. There's a lot of stuff I don't remember. There's a ton of stuff from my childhood I don't remember. My memory is not amazing. I just cannot get comfortable. But I do remember that it was a kickback. I had a kickback in my apartment that I shared with Christian over in, I think, Metairie. And you came, and I remember, I think you were, like you said, you were reading a book in the corner, if I'm not mistaken. And it wasn't a ton of people, because Krista says house party. I would not call that a house party. For me, that was a kickback. But this is also like Bay Area, like lingo, and me needing to be like really specific and like words mean things type thing. Other people might call it a house party, but it just wasn't a lot of people there. There wasn't like a really loud music. We weren't like dancing and drinking and doing like we were. It was a bunch of squares hanging out. You know, it was a bunch of nerds hanging out, like semi-cool nerds. Like, mind you, the university that Krista and I graduated from, it's an HBCU, but of like all the HBCUs, it's not one of the like cool ones, right? Like that's how I usually describe it. It's like the more nerdy, academic focused one. And that's not this, anyway, I'm not gonna get into it. And so I remember that. And I also remember like people being like, who is that? Like, why is she just in the corner? Like, she's not talking to anybody. She's not, you know, and that can be like off-putting to some people, right? Like some people can, I'm sure you've heard it throughout your life, right? Like we've talked about this where people are like, oh, is she stuck up, or is she a bitch? Or, like, no, to be clear, nobody there was like calling you a bitch. I'm just saying, like, these are things that we've heard when you're an introvert or when you're quiet or, you know, you're doing your own thing. And I just remember being like, I don't know. I get good vibes. Like, I'm not saying what y'all are saying. I'm seeing somebody who likes chilling in the corner, like reading a book. Like, it just wasn't a big deal to me. And then as we've gotten to know each other over what's been almost 20 years now, I would like to say I was right. And so the other thing I would say about that, the reason that I asked if you remember when we met and how long we've known each other, is because despite the fact that we've known each other for almost 20 years, I would say there's a couple things. One, I met you through your now husband, right? Like, he and I were friends first, but I would say like you and I are way closer now than he and I ever were. One. Two, I would say in the last year and a half is the closest we've ever been, right? Despite being, I think it's literally 1,428 miles apart. And I did look it up, right? Like, we're almost 1,500 miles apart. I did. I looked it up. I just wanted to know. And despite like our physical distance, like our lack of proximity, like we're closer now than I think we've ever been. And then like, I would say, despite the time that we spent together in college, and the times that we've hung out since then, like last year when you came out here for my surgery, I I would say is the most we've sort of like gotten to know each other in like a much deeper way. Not to say that our friendship, our relationship was like always super surface. I think with both of us being introverts, like I really am not good with those type of relationships anyway. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it definitely, there was a lot more depth to our friendship now since that experience, at least for me, than there's ever been. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there's a level of intimacy that you develop with someone when you go through trauma together. And when somebody
sure.
is watching you go through it, and just that whole experience, I feel like I know you on a whole new level.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My bad, y'all. I'm good at this, but I just was silencing my devices. Yeah, I completely agree, right? And I remember even when I was trying to decide like who I was gonna ask to like be there for my surgery, I wasn't necessarily as worried about the recovery. I was worried, like I said, I really just wanted to make sure there were eyes paying attention in the hospital. And there's a few reasons for that. But yeah, I completely agree. There's a level of intimacy, there's a level of like trust. And even when I was trying to decide who was there, I had a couple of options and I was like, who do I trust most right now? But not just trust most, who do I trust most, but also know that they understand my like why I need them present, right? Like, because I could tell that to somebody else. I could say, there's, issues with the healthcare system. I could explain my story and some of them already know my story and blah, blah, blah. But with you being a Black woman and dealing with the healthcare system, I know that you understand things in a way that other people can't. And I know that you can advocate for yourself in a way that most people don't. And I trust you. I trusted you to advocate for me in a way that plenty of other people just could not have. And I knew that going into that surgery, I needed to feel as comfortable as like I was already going to be thinking about a million things. So whatever I didn't have to worry about, I didn't want to. And so I'm really grateful that you were able to be here for that. The flip side of that is that was 1 month after the diagnosis shakeup that I'm calling, right? The getting a new diagnosis, and then finding out a diagnosis that I thought was correct for the last 20 years was not correct, that it's actually part of this other thing. And like, oh no, you don't actually have this, you have this. And like, oh yeah, also there's no fix. Like all of these things were happening. You came a month after that bomb got dropped on me. And that was like sort of the end of a over a year long process. And it's for anybody who doesn't know, we're talking about neurodivergence specifically, right? And so I remember being in a place where I was like, okay, this is something that I cannot change. I can't quote unquote fix. It is what it is. I am who I am. So it's time to like sort of like work on accepting that, work on accepting this version of me. Because I remember maybe 2 years before I start, so maybe like 2022, I remember texting my mom and just being like sort of just like weeping and being like, what is wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. And I remember using those words because I remember growing up, my mom told me like, if you are the common denominator, it's you, right? Like if these things keep happening and you're the common denominator, then you need to sort of like look at yourself. And I grew up like hearing that and believing that, right? And so I kept thinking like, all these relationships, keep, and I don't mean romantic, I mean like friendships and like issues with team members and business. I was like, what is going on? I'm like, I'm trying my best, I'm doing my best, but something is wrong with me. Something is wrong. Like this, I can't figure it out. I've never been able to like really figure out friendships in the way that I've wanted to, or even socializing, maintaining friendships in the way that I want to. I saw my mom do it. My mom, who is a textbook extrovert, socialite, social butterfly. Friendships and maintaining those friendships always seemed so easy for her. It always seemed so natural. It just like her being her seemed so natural. It just seemed like there just wasn't a lot of thought and effort put into her living her, not to say like her living her life, but her being who she was, her moving through the world. And again, I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm saying like in terms of like the social aspect of things, it just seemed, I don't know, it seemed to come easy for her in a way that it did not for me, in a way that I could not understand. And by 2022, it had gotten to a point where I was like, I am broken. Something is wrong with my brain. Something's wrong with my mind. I cannot figure out what it is. I got to figure it out because I need to be fixed. And then I got the diagnosis a month before my surgery, a month before you came out here. And while I was sort of relieved to sort of like know and understand, oh yeah, okay, a lot of things make sense now. Was never would have guessed this diagnosis, but a lot of things made sense. But the flip side of the relief and the understanding and things making sense was the realization that like I would never be fixed, right? When we go get a diagnosis from a doctor, you're going to figure out what's wrong so that you can start working on fixing it, quote on fixing it, right? Getting a cure, getting treatment, whatever. And I had to sort of like realize and accept, oh, like there are things I can do. I can sort of like set myself up for success. I can continue to accommodate myself, but I cannot change who I am fundamentally. Growing up, I always felt like everybody got like a firmware update, you know, like if our brains are computers, is an operating system, everybody got a firmware update that I didn't get. I don't know how to find this update. I don't know how to get it, right? And that's how I felt. And so you came
That's a valid description right there. I love that.
Yeah, I mean that's like it's the easiest way for me to sort of like explain it to people. It's like there's a download missing. I don't know which download. I don't even know how to figure out which download, but I know it's missing. I can't find it. I can't figure it out. And as a result, my operating system ain't operating right. And so again, you got here about almost a month exactly after I had that realization, and I decided, okay, let me try to stop fixing it. Let me try to stop focusing on fixing it and changing who I am, and like let's see who I am and who I would be if I just accepted who I am. Like if I just accepted, okay, this is me, this is how my brain works, this is who I am. And so I was working on, you know, what we call unmasking, right? And I think you being here, and you can tell me that, I kind of want to know your perspective, like what things, like what your experience was having, you know, spent time with me in college, and then, you know, throughout, and I even like staying at your house for like a little bit after, not too long after college, right before we both moved out of New Orleans. So you can kind of tell me, and I know we all change and we all grow, but you can sort of like give me your perspective, because I was in a period when you got here of being very intentional about unmasking, about just like, who am I without trying to be the type of human I'm supposed to be, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So I felt like a different version of me.
It was kind of eye-opening because you've always seemed so very like just on it. You've got everything lined up. You're organized. You're well-spoken. You are career-driven. And then getting to kind of see you at your most vulnerable points and the things that the accommodations we talked about, like the things that you needed in place so that you could feel safe and so that you could feel comfortable, and some of the stimming and the safe foods. Remember, I made a list of safe foods for my stay so that when I got there, I would know exactly what I could help fix that was going to make you feel safe and comfortable in recovery.
Yeah, for
sure. So it was a level of like getting to know the real you. Yeah. And I liked it. I liked being able to see like, there she is. There's the person that energetically I knew we always had connection, but getting to actually see it on that psychological and emotional level, it was good.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so part of the reason, like, I was asking for your perspective, despite the fact that, like, I sort of hate hearing about myself, you know, usually, especially when it's compliment. I don't know if you remember, I was writing something down in the kitchen, and you were like, "Oh, I like your handwriting," or something you said, like, about liking my handwriting. And my first thing was to be like, "This is not neat, though. Like, this is sloppy. And I caught myself, and I was like, "Thank you." Like, thank you, right? Because that's something that, like, I'm working on, is just, like, hearing positive things about myself and just sit with it. Like, just you're not going to cease to exist because somebody.
You even called me on that. You said, "Hey,
I did.
I'm giving you a compliment." Stop.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So thank you for that, because I think throughout, for as long as I can remember, a large part of a large part of my life has been like being mindful. I'm trying to be mindful of the words that I use, because I don't want to say a large concern or worry or something that I cared about, but I was always trying to be mindful of how I was perceived by others. And that was not something that I feel like I feel like that was something I had to do. Like that felt like survival. And I think that's true for a lot of Black women, a lot of queer folks, a lot of marginalized folks, right? Like you have to be aware and mindful about of how you're perceived by others individually, by the world at large, by the systems that are in place. You know, we often hear about the like sort of angry Black woman trope and stereotype, right? So you have to be mindful of like your emotions. And like, you know, for a long time, I really was like, oh, I never get angry. No, anger is just not something I really experience that often. Through enough like therapy and like working on myself, I was like, oh, you're tripping. You are lying to yourself if you feel like you never experience anger. You do, you repress it. And I realized like a lot of that like repression has to do with like safety and survival. Like I don't get to, especially as a more masked, tomboyish presenting Black woman, I don't get to be angry, right? Because I'm already it would already be an angry Black woman. But then, oh, you're queer and you look like that too. Oh no, that's all bad, right? I mean, from interacting with police to interacting, you know, to like job interviews or being at work, like what you just have to be mindful about how others perceive you. And so the positive side is that gives me a lot of like self-awareness, or so I thought. But then the other part of that is you're constantly thinking about how others perceive you, and you don't always get to just be. You don't always get to just be like your truest self. You don't always get to experience and just like sit in yourself and not worry about how you're perceived by the rest of the world. I think it's why I do enjoy so much alone time. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, I completely agree, because one of the 6 fears that most people have is criticism, fear of criticism, and just the backlash of what other people think about them. And so I know when you were talking about your diagnosis and stuff, it actually gave me some freedom and courage to be like, well, you know what? 2025, I'm going to be unmasked. I'm going to be the person that I'm going to stick to my most authentic self. I'm going to say a lot of things that are probably going to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let them sit with them. Because the biggest thing for me was people pleasing. And, you know, I'm a recovering people pleaser in recovery still. But just not letting other people feel the uncomfortable emotions before I rush in to cover it, to rush in to smooth and make everything better. And, you know, part of it's oldest child. The other part is just not wanting to be judged or have people look at me some kind of way. So I 100% get it. And you just taking those steps to be like, you know what, this is my friend. This is who I am. It is what it is.
Yeah. And I think that's why I still have, it's actually right there. I bought this like postcard, this card, because I wanted to send, I wanted to like be able to put it into words. Because of course, you know, because I have home training, I sent you like, thank you for coming out here and being with me, right? That's like sort of standard for me. But I really wanted to put into words the magnitude of what that was, because not only were you here to sort of like be that, you know, eyewitness and be there for me for the physical health stuff like the surgery or whatever, but it being you versus somebody else, versus like me asking my homie Armand or asking my neighbor to look out for me, or it being you gave me a safe space to sort of play and explore and try to figure out who am I without this mask, and like who am I just sitting in this, I don't want to even say new identity, right? Like this new label, this new diagnosis, right? But it's always been there. And so I think even beyond like you being there to like keep an eye on the doctors and the anesthesiologists and be like, don't play. And because, you know, when you come out of surgery, they will you to recovery, and whoever's with you, they're supposed to wait until you wake up. And I said, no, that's not happening. So as soon as I come out, I need her to be present. Like before I wake up, like when I'm out of the OR, she needs to be present. And there's a number of reasons that is true, and why I got an exception for that to be true. But more importantly, I think most importantly for me was that it being you being someone I trust and somebody who I knew could sort of understand and knew and understood what I was going through, gave me a safe space emotionally, spiritually, psychologically to start to unmask, to be myself which is vulnerable as hell, right? As we might see if we get into some of these clips that I've been seeing on social media, because people are wild, yo. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so really, really, really grateful for that. Okay. I need to adjust my lighting a bit. So there's a saying, There's two idioms that sort of mean the same thing that I heard so much growing up. And that is birds of a feather flock together, and you are the company you keep. Or as I usually say, we are the company we keep. And some people don't think that's true. Some people don't agree with those. Some people just live and operate in denial. Okay. Because what I can tell you for sure is that birds of a feather flock together, and we are the company we keep. So what does that mean? Because I don't usually speak in like idioms and indirect. I definitely prefer like direct, clear communication. Just say what you mean, right? At the same time, I love these idioms because I think they're concise and they work perfectly. And it just means people who have things in common, like have fundamental things in common, end up hanging out, end up forming communities, end up socializing with each other. And then we are the company we keep is really sort of another way to describe that sort of same phenomenon. And I think that that's true. One of the reasons that I know it's true is because of my own experience, right? So growing up in high school, I had a friend group, and then in college, I had a friend group, like a core friend group, and in both of those friend groups, we would find out years later just how much we had in common. From neurodivergent diagnoses to being queer and not realizing it at the time, or not being out, to fundamental things. I think I want to say like my entire the people I was closest to in college, I think every single one of them is queer except one person, maybe. And at the time, we didn't know that. And when I say queer, I don't just mean like queer in some way. We didn't even know that at the time. But I think that's just what happens, because I think your identity is more than just a label. It really speaks to who you are, what you believe, the way you operate. And so that's what I mean when I say birds of a feather flock together, and we are the company we keep.
Even energetically, I mean, it's scientifically proven that whatever frequency you're on, you're going to attract that frequency, more people on that frequency. So you have this thing of like attracting like, and it's something that, we see everywhere.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, that just kind of keeps happening throughout my life, right? Like you just sort of like gravitate toward each other. And speaking of, like, there's a joke amongst like neurodivergent people that NEUROSPICY folks are magnets for each other. Like we seem to find each other in a crowd, or we seem to like find each other. It's like, when like you're the only. It's different than when you're like the only Black person in the space, and you can see, you're like, you're in a sea of like not Black people, and then you see like one or two other Black people, and you kind of like, you give each other, I see you, and like maybe you go sit together or whatever, not knowing anything else about each other, right? But you know that there's probably some shared experience there. With neurodivergence, it's different because you don't always, there's not necessarily physical indicators, right? Unless somebody's wearing a t-shirt that says like, I'm whatever, you don't know. And yet we somehow keep getting drawn to each other, right? We somehow, it's like having a radar, like much like queer folks who feel like, oh, I have a gaydar, I have a queer, queer radar. I think the same is true for NEUROSPICY folks. And so I find it interesting, like, just like I said, most of my homies from college and high school turned out to be queer. A good number of folks that I was friends with in college and have been friends with since then have turned out to be neurodivergent in some way. So let's talk about, we've been saying neurodivergent. Let's talk about a little bit about neurodivergent, right? Let's just like pause for a second and define it. So according to like basically every source I read, I wanted to find like a very explicit source, but every source basically said the same thing. So you could Google it, find one, it's going to say the same thing. Someone who is neurodivergent has a brain type that functions differently from quote unquote typical brains, right? And quoting my psychiatrist, who is a neurodevelopmental disability specialist, to whom I was referred for diagnostic clarity, said, don't panic. There's no need to panic. This is what she said when she diagnosed me, right? Like, I don't know what if my face was communicating what I was thinking, but she just was like, don't panic. It just means that you have a brain type that works differently from most people. And so, yes, that comes with challenges, but it also has its strengths. And I think that is a really good summary of what neurodivergence is, right? Krista, when did you first learn about neurodivergence? Like, when did you first hear the term? What was it like? Talk to us about the context. What's your understanding of neurodivergence? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I don't think I heard the term until maybe 2022. But my brother was diagnosed ADHD when he was about 7. And then my sister was diagnosed probably in 2022, 2020. Yeah, about 2022 as well. And then my own daughter was diagnosed a couple years ago too. But I didn't start hearing the term like neurospicy or neurodivergence until TikTok started, coming into my house, 2023, that time frame, because I don't know, all of a sudden it was trending. It was not sure if it was the cool thing or if all of a sudden, because now we have so many more resources and so much more information, that people, especially our generation of Black women, were late diagnoses. And so then it's like everyone now is on a discovery wave of, well, I wonder if I have it too, especially if you start looking at some of the symptoms and the markers and the flags that say, oh no, you're neurospicy, you're on the spectrum. So that's kind of when I figured it out, and it just kind of really started making me do a deeper dive into the things that that I've seen in my life. I remember Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only do it looking back. And so I had to look back at my own childhood and be like, oh my God, this moment right here, I was completely stimming. This moment over here, like, oh man, sensory overload. And that wasn't a meltdown. That was me like trying to tell you, like, hey guys, I am so overstimulated right now. My nervous system needs some help. So it just recently in the last few years. So the last 2 years, I would say 2023 through presently, has just been a discovery process of not only helping myself figure out how to hack my brain. That's how I like to think of it, because it's a computer I can't seem to get into, and I just need to figure out the systems and how it works and how to make it work in the world that we live in. But also how to help my kids navigate it, because we've got some neurospicy there, ADHD, high functioning autism. So
Okay, that makes sense. And about the like trend versus like cool thing, I think multiple things are true, right? I think that we now have more information, people are getting diagnosed, but there's also like when you start to discover new information, that can be sort of exciting and sort of trending. Also, relatability, I think, is what's cool. And so I don't necessarily think these like diagnoses or these conditions are cool. Maybe some people think they are, right? But I think the cool factor is the relatability, right? Like when you see somebody talking about something, you're like, oh, it's not just me, right? Like I'm famous for being like, oh, okay, so it's not just me. Because the thing is, like, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't necessarily know that your experience is any different until you start to hear about other people's experiences. And that's why I'm always so like, I think people sharing their lived experiences is so important, right? Because we all learn from each other, but perhaps more importantly, we learn about ourselves. Like when we hear other people's lived experiences and their stories, that's really, to me, probably the best way to, yes, learn about other people. I think that's a given, but it's also a really great way to learn about ourselves. And so I think that is like part of what the cool factor is. So I just want to go over, I want to list a few types of neurodivergence, because there are a number of types. Usually when you hear neurodivergent, I think the two most common ones that people think about are probably ADHD and autism, but those are definitely not the only types of neurodivergence. Those are not the only things that you can be diagnosed with, right? So I'm just going to list a few of them, and they are like in different categories. But so for neurodevelopmental types of neurodivergence, you have autism spectrum disorder, you have ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, which is similar to dyslexia, but it has to do with numbers, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, general like intellectual disabilities, auditory processing disorder, visual processing disorder, sensory processing disorder, hyperlexia, which has to do with like reading and taking information like that, Tourette syndrome, and then some of the psychiatric and mood disorders are bipolar disorder, OCD, other anxiety disorders, PTSD and complex PTSD, and then some genetic and chromosomal types of neurodivergence include Down syndrome, Fragile X, Prader-Willi, and Klinefelter. And so there's a couple of reasons I wanted to list those different types, not just to get a baseline of what we're talking about here, but also because what I think happens, and this really ties back into what you were talking about, Krista, about, you know, being on TikTok and seeing videos and relatability and people giving these very short, condensed, quick examples of their experience with a particular type of neurodivergence, or, you know, a neurodivergence in general, but especially on TikTok, it's a very short form, right? And so there's not really a lot of room for nuance and explanation and context, right? And so people just hear these like quick things and they go, oh, I must be that thing. Or if at the very least they go, oh, I can relate to that. Very cool. But as you heard that list, there are a number of things that you can experience as sort of like standalone or one-off experiences that don't necessarily mean that you have larger diagnoses or particular, you know, almost like an umbrella diagnosis, right? So, for example, things like auditory processing disorder, visual and sensory processing disorder, those are things that a number of people experience. But if you experience those things, but then don't have these other criteria for like ADHD, then you probably don't have ADHD, right? Like you might experience some of the elements of ADHD, like struggle with executive function, right? Or you might have some of the experiences of autism, like the auditory processing, the sensory processing, but you might not meet the other criteria. And like with any diagnoses, especially with the DSM-5, there are a number of criteria that any one person could have, and you need to meet a certain number of them to be diagnosed with that thing, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I'm not the psychiatrist here, right? Okay, just been in therapy my whole life, but so hopefully that makes sense. So I think that's why people can sometimes see videos without context, without nuance, and go, "Oh, I might be autistic. Oh, I might have ADHD," right? And so even though this was happening to me for a number of years, I knew that, like, I knew enough to know, like, oh, yeah, I can relate to like 4 out of 5 of those things, but that's probably because of my OCD. I was diagnosed with OCD back in 2006. That's probably what that is. And I just was really very dismissive of it. And like you said with one of the young ones, by the way, Krista has 3 kids, and I call them the young ones because in my mind, like how I see it, I don't know, this might be true for other people. One, I realize I'm old, right? Like I'm a millennial, but I don't feel my age, right? Sometimes I have to be like, remind myself, you are the adult in the room, right? And so also I can't imagine what it's like to be a parent, but I just witness it through like Krista. And so I'm like, I don't know. It's like watching Krista's life is like watching a movie, right? And in my mind, this is how I sort of like get my mind to understand what like parenting is like she's like a tour manager or like the manager of like a singing group. And the singing group are her kids or like some type of entertainment group. And so I call them the young ones, right? So if you ever hear me say that, that's what I'm talking about. But like you were saying, when one of the young ones got diagnosed, it sort of like gave you this opportunity to self-reflect and be like, oh, well, I have this experience as well. And that was the same thing that happened to me. And so I don't know how many people will remember Pro, my godson. That's very much what happened. And one of the reasons when I was trying to decide what date we wanted to come back on, I knew that April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. And so I wanted to make sure we came back in April since this was the conversation we were going to start with. And then when I was trying to choose a day, I realized, oh, well, the 28th, because we were supposed to do this yesterday, by the way. I realized, oh, the 28th, that's my godson's birthday. That's Pro's birthday. And that was kind of like a full circle moment for me because Pro is the reason, probably the only reason, maybe that I am diagnosed today, that I have any type of like neurodivergent diagnosis today, because initially we were joking when he was he was a toddler still. And they used to always joke about how alike we were, right? Now, keep in mind, I know I've been diagnosed with OCD, and I know that he's doing a lot of the same things that I did, you know, lining his toys up and counting his socks and organizing. I mean, we're talking about a toddler, you know, like, a lot of the same things that I found interesting, that I got enjoyment out of. We're driving down the street and he's reading signs. He can't read, but he can read, right? Like he's reading billboards. If you put words in front of the boy, he was just reading them. And like Pro, I was a kid, like, can I get hooked on phonics? I saw the infomercial on the screen. Can I get hooked on phonics? And like, hooked on phonics are for kids struggling to read. You don't need hooked on, but I want hooked on phonics. Like, I just would like to read. Reading the dictionary. Like, I just could not get enough. And so there was this joke initially, like, that's actually your kid, you know, like, blah, blah, blah. And then things started to get a little bit more serious, right? Because in my mind, I was like, well, I do those things, or I've been told that I do those things because of OCD. But OCD is usually, it's an anxiety disorder that's usually a result of trauma. Not always, but usually. I don't know, like what is his trauma? I thought my trauma was like, medical trauma. I thought that's why I had OCD. I sort of connected all these dots in my mind that were inaccurate. But I didn't know that at the time. And I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. He's like 2. He was a little older than 2. Long story short, he starts going through his own evaluation process. And we start learning things. And we start learning about types of neurodivergence and about autism. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then folks around me, including his mom, start dropping hints and asking me questions. And like, well, if this is him and y'all are alike, do you think maybe you and right? And I wasn't picking up on the hints at all. I was just like, that's funny. That's really funny. I guess that was a joke. I don't know. I just wasn't taking it seriously. I was just living in denial. And then as I think knowledge of the different types of neurodivergent diagnoses, like as they start to get popular, more and more people start to ask me the question, like, oh, do you think maybe you? And I was like, why are people giving this? Is so silly. Like, no, do I seem like, no, of course no. What are you talking about? And then I got diagnosed with ADHD on accident. And I say on accident because that is not why I was seeing that particular psychiatrist. I was seeing him for something else entirely. And he made the mistake. It apparently was so obvious to him. He sort of was operating under the guise that I had already been diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, oh, I don't have ADHD. He was like, no, are you sure? And I was like, no, I don't have it. He's like, no, this is my diagnoses. I don't have it. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, all right. Long story short, I ended up on ADHD meds, and I said, oh, I think this is how other people's brains work. Wow, that's fascinating. Fast forward, here we are now. So one, happy birthday, Pro. Don't know if you'll ever see this video, but happy birthday. And also thank you for existing, because I don't know that I'd be like here talking about this, having this conversation from this perspective. I'd probably still be talking about it in terms of advocacy, but at least from this perspective. And so before we go any further, we're going to talk a little bit about the journey of self-discovery. We're going to talk a little bit about self-awareness and all of that stuff. But what was that experience like for you when the young ones start, showing signs, start sort of reflecting yourself back to you? Because I hear that's what I hear a lot about. That's what, parenthood is like. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's interesting because you were talking about all the intersections of ADHD and autism and OCD and stuff. And it's so crazy because I had pulled up this chart. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Hold it a little closer, but it just says misdiagnosis.
Hold it close to your face. That's how you can see it. Camera can pick it up. But I got it. Gotcha.
There we go. Misdiagnosis Monday, and it just shows like all the different overlaps. Okay. And it was one of those things where we were trying to figure out, Zoe was going through what seemed to be a depression. And really the only way I even recognized it is because when I was going through what I was going through in 2018, and you came to Oklahoma to visit us, and you were like, sis,
I remember that.
Let me tell you, if nobody's told you yet, did you know you're going through depression? And I was very much like, what? No, I'm such a happy person. I'm not depressed. What are you talking about? So I recognized it when Zoe started going through whatever she was going through, just the inability to focus, the inability to multitask, the absolute overwhelm. Anytime someone gave her more than one instruction at a time, and she'd go do none of it. Not keeping her room clean, overeating, just like auditory things, like where she just wanted to hear herself crunch chips. And it drives my husband absolutely crazy because she'll just sit there with like HD chips, just crunch. And I told him, it's like, you can't get mad at her. She likes the way it sounds. Like it gives her that hit.
Stimulating. Yeah, exactly. It's stimulating. Exactly. The production of, yep.
And then, so we went and we got her diagnosed, and I was like, okay, well, ADHD, it's not that bad. Like we just manage it. Like we do all the things, we get the vitamins that they're recommending. If we need to try medication, we'll try medication. But then as she's getting older, then I'm starting to notice the things that my younger two are doing. Like My middle child, first of all, this little girl is an energizer bunny, Tasmanian devil, like all over the place, whirlwind of energy. But she had this thing where she would parrot information back to you, like just for the sake of hearing it. The what do you call it? Echolalia.
Echolalia, yep. Echolalia, yep.
Always so hard to say that one.
Yep.
She would do that. But also, anytime we were in the hallway at my mom's apartment, it echoes. She would absolutely hate it. Hands over the ears, low-key kind of freaking out about it. Would only want to wear leggings, never any jeans or anything, because sensory-wise, she didn't want it. And she completely had a meltdown when my husband's getting her ready for school. And he's like, just pick some pants. And she's like, I can't find soft pants. So she didn't get dressed. She just sat there. And she would rather be in trouble. She would rather die on the heel of, no, I'm not going to do that or whatever it is you asked me to do. And she has a good reason. But it's frustrating as a parent because you're like, especially if you grew up like us, we grew up in the, you're going to do what I say because I say it kind of parenting style versus the, I care about your feelings parenting style that we're trying to do with our kids, healing generational trauma and all that. And then my son, he's so interesting. He didn't talk for a while. He didn't really have like full sentences or a whole lot to say until closer to 3. I mean, he would say like little words here and there, but never actually like really fully actually talk. And he was a info gathering, data mining, just brilliant little boy that I was just so confused because I was like, you didn't get it from me. At least in my opinion, you didn't. But listing off these dinosaurs I'd never heard of. I had to Google this one dinosaur. I couldn't tell you what it was today because he said it with such clarity that I was like, he couldn't possibly be right. It was like Paralophyses or something random like that. And I Googled it. Sure enough, there it was.
Nailed it.
Or he would be hyper fixated on the weather and tell us all the different types of weather movements and natural disasters. And to this day, he wants to know what's going on in the weather. He wants to see the radar. Mind you, he's 5 years old now, getting ready to turn 6. And he still very much hyper fixates on one topic and he will deep dive into it forever until the end of the internet. I don't know. So they're all so different and so unique in their neurodivergence that it really requires a lot of work, a lot of empathy, a lot of patience, and just a willingness to let them uncover who they are without you getting in the way of their process.
Yep.
So I'm very much just sitting back and letting them process it. And as they ask, I'll tell them, I'll talk, and we'll process it together. But for the most part, it's just us discovering together how your brain works and how you feel best learning and stuff like that. So
okay, so I got a few things, a few follow-up questions. So I remember you were saying this about like about the clothes, not being able to find the clothes, and like some of the other stuff. I remember, and I might have told you this, but I remember telling my former psychiatrist, because my mom used to always get on me about washing the dishes. When it comes to dishes, it's one of the things that I loathe the most. I will clean a bathroom. I will scrub a toilet. Like there are things that things that most people would not. Anyways, the point is I don't like washing dishes. I don't like the feeling of it. It's a sensory nightmare. I hate standing there. It has to be done a certain way. So I need things to be in order. If I need to wash all the spoons first or all the utensils first. Like it is just such an involved and complicated process for me, right? Does it have to be like that? Yes, like for me it does, right? Like for other people, no, but like for me it does, because if I don't wash the dishes in a particular order, they're not going to all fit on the drying rack. Then I'm going to have to read it. It has to be for me to get through it. It's exhausting. It's draining. Sometimes it's triggering depending on where I'm at. Now, this has been my whole life, and the kitchen was one of my chores growing up. And I remember my mom would leave for work about 4 a.m. And if she got up and saw that the kitchen, I had maybe cleaned the kitchen but didn't wash the dishes, or I just not wash the dishes, she was waking me up and you're going downstairs to wash the dishes, making it even worse. But then I became an adult, and when I moved back, and I was at her house, that became a point of conflict, a point of contention. I don't understand why you can't just wash the dishes. You brought down 2 dishes. You saw that there was 3 in the sink. Why would you not just wash all the dishes there? And instead of explaining it, because I didn't fully understand it myself, but I just remember telling my psychiatrist, I would rather my mom think I'm lazy than for her to think I'm crazy. Because if I explain what's happening in my head, if I explain what I'm experiencing, surely she's going to think I'm crazy. Like, who wouldn't think I'm crazy? I think I'm crazy, right? Crazy. Like, it's a word I don't really use anymore. But, and I remember my psychiatrist being like, oh, no, sweetie, like, I've seen crazy. You're not crazy. Like, and really kind of like helping me with that. But the point I'm making is like, if you don't have the experience, you have no idea. Right. And it allows me to be a lot more like empathetic with others and in situations that I don't quite understand. I don't quite know. Right. Because I know what I'm experiencing on the inside. You know, it's not translating on the outside, but I know what I'm experiencing on the inside. So I'm taking people at their word when they say I'm experiencing X. It is tough. It is difficult. It is impossible. I hear you. I get that. Right. And so I heard a lot of that. And one thing that I love, and I think I've told you this before, but in case I haven't, is a lot of aspects of your parenting, right? Is like allowing the young ones to be who they are, being there for them, providing them a safe space, right? Allowing them to come to you and to process and so forth and so on. So there's a couple things I wanted to say about that. One, actually, let me start with this. You were like, I don't think he got it from me, like the information gathering, and he's so smart and he's doing all these things. I don't know. I could be wrong. He's the only young one I haven't met, but I think he did. I think it just looks differently. I think his interests are different, and maybe like the way that he hyperfixates might be different, right? But in terms of like information, and again, this is just sort of like my perspective, but there's a lot of things that you described that I'm like, no, that's you. Like, that's you, bro. And there's probably some things that don't apply, but I don't know. Maybe he did get it from you. And part of the reason I'm saying that,
fair enough.
Part of the reason I'm saying that is because this is how women and Black people went undiagnosed and underdiagnosed and misdiagnosed for so long. Like, why the phenomenon of misdiagnosis, I don't know this phenomenon, but why it's like so pervasive, right? Because it looks differently, right? So like a lot of what you're telling me is really kind of like the stereotypical boy interest for a top, like dinosaurs and like, you know, all these. It makes perfect sense, right? And so I think it's a lot easier to spot. But if your interest or your hyperfixation or your whatever is Janet Jackson instead of Thomas the Train, well, that's normal. Everybody loves Janet Jackson. No, not quite like I love Janet. Well, all Janet fans know a lot about Janet. Not as much as I know about it. Like, I got Google alerts on Janet. Like, right? Like, it just looks different. Or, you know, other things. And I'm so grateful that like my psychiatrist who ended up diagnosing me as an Afro-Latina, right? She's amazing because she was able to translate and speak back to me a lot of the criteria that I met. Because I remember her saying, I will probably never forget this, but I remember her saying, yeah, like, so yeah, you meet the criteria almost 100%. And I was like, no, you're wrong, right? Like the only reason I started this process was for you to confirm that, no, I don't have this diagnosis. And okay. And maybe even if I do, like, I'm like mild borderline, like maybe just, I like barely meet the criteria. So for her to say like, no, you meet the criteria almost 100%. I was like, you're wrong. Like you're probably talented. I trust that. I haven't explained myself well. It must be me. I must be communicating like, you know, not as clear as I should have been because you're wrong. And then she immediately proceeded to give me examples from my own life, from like things that I had told her and say, okay, so you remember how you do this, this, and this? That's this. Like you probably hear examples that sound like this, but actually this is also an example of that. Also, you know how you do blah, and she just went through this list and described me. And I will say to this day, family, friends, whatever, she is the first and probably still only person who has really explained and described me so accurately. I had no choice but to be like, oh, okay, I guess you're right. Okay, my bad. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. And I'm gonna stop telling you how to do your job. So that's kind of why I bring that up, because you know it's easy to be like, nah, he doesn't get that from me, but I don't know, maybe he does. Okay, and so here's the other thing I want to say: you are very patient, you're very gracious when it comes to the young ones, right? Like you give them a lot of space, a lot of leeway. You make sure you create safe zones and safe opportunities. You make sure it's safe for them to come to you, to be open with you, to have that relationship, especially when it comes to their diagnoses, their mental health, like who they are, right? And so then my question is, because we now have proof that you understand and know how to do those things. Offer compassion, be patient, have grace, speak gently, in a way that is very affirming. My question is, how well do you do that for yourself?
I would say that I am working on it because I definitely don't give myself grace.
Yeah.
Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, no, we were just having a processing session with my coach, and she said, "You don't have any idea how great you could be if you would let go of how you feel things should be." Because I have this perfectionism thing that I struggle with, where if it can't be exactly how I imagineered it in my head,
Mm-hmm.
then I don't want to do any of it. Like it's just not going to happen. This paralysis takes over. And yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're going to start learning how to speak to ourselves the way we speak to our
Yep.
kids. We're going to reparent ourselves. Like, even as far as like looking back at moments in my childhood where I'm like, wow, I really could have used some grace right here.
Yep.
And then maybe I would have been a more confident person when it came to being in high school and college and, all of these things and stepping into the world and not being so afraid to be myself.
Yeah.
But just the discovery process even had me going through, and I think you're right about what you said about Liam and how he probably did get it from me, because once I opened the door to all the neurodivergence and spiciness, I started like walking around and taking notes and diagnosing everyone in my family. I'm like, well, this person's got autism and that person's got a little bit of OCD and there's the ADHD in the gene pool. And so I was able to immediately start seeing the patterns everywhere.
Yeah.
It was like the world became HD and hyper focused. And I was like, wow, like, oh, okay, so there's really not anything wrong with me when I'm having like these anxiety and panic attacks and the need for things to be lined up exactly the way they need to be.
Yep.
It just means like my brain operates differently.
Yeah.
And a lot of it for myself was like you talked about suppressing emotions in the beginning, because in my household we were not allowed to express emotion. Not really, not unless it was a happy emotion. If it wasn't happy, if it was sad, if it's anger, no, you got to go do that in your room. Go cry in your room if you got to cry. Go be mad outside if you got to go be mad. And I never realized how when certain things are happening or when things don't line up the way I imagined them to need to line up, that I would be filled with this rage on the inside, but never let it out. Just that ADHD rage of like literally wanting to throw a tantrum or throw something across the room or, lash out. But I had learned, because, little girls are well behaved, little girls, are quiet, little girls are submissive, to just hold all that inside until one day the dam broke.
Yep. So a couple things I want to say. So part of like giving the young ones like space for that, and there's a couple things. So I think I just told you, I don't know how long ago this was, where I told you like if somebody had just asked me, oh, do you have like sensory challenges and do like things bother you, like socks or clothes or whatever, I would have said no. I would have been like, no, it's fine. Like I love like fashion, blah, blah, blah. I would have said no. I would have never imagined that my sense of style, the clothes that I wear, has anything to do with my brain type. This is what I like these, right? That's what I thought. And then I had this light bulb moment. I was like getting out of the car to like go into a store, and I remember texting you this like long thing because I had just had this realization, which was, oh my God, I have so many sensory challenges that I just didn't realize it. Like my clothes, I'm like constantly adjusting them because I don't like things like on the back of my neck, and I don't like things hitting me on a certain part of my waist, and I don't like the way certain fabrics feel. Like and probably of all the sensory things, probably like certain fabrics is probably the least of them, but other things like the way that they fit and which part of my body they sit on. Like I can't have things like on my waist, like, you know, but I can't have them too low on my hip. They have to be at the right spot. This, like, I don't like things on my neck. I don't like all of these things that I didn't realize, partly because I really wasn't allowed to, not in a safe way, right? Like, not only do I feel like I had like too many other like issues that I was worried about, but also what I realized was like, after I suppressed a lot of that stuff for years. Like I gaslighted myself for a long time. And then the third part is like suppression, gaslighting myself, but then also just not realizing that other people don't experience this. Like other people don't have this problem. Other people don't have to like keep adjusting and do this and like because things are hitting on a certain part of my shoulders and like on my neck and like I'm sorry, I can't wear that lanyard because it makes me feel like I want to hang myself. Like other people are not experiencing that, right? So those three things is what like really made me it made like my sensory challenges a blind spot for me. And so I absolutely love that like you give them the freedom to just for things to just not be okay. Right. And one of the early things that I had was I remember I was getting Pro ready for school one day and he too was very particular about the way that he wore his clothes. But I'm particular about the way that I wear my clothes. And so I usually help dress kids the way that I wear my, and I remember it being a belt and I have to wear my belt. I put it on a certain way and I wear it a certain way. And he was like fussing. He was like, this is not how I wear my belt. And I was like, but that's how belts are supposed, and I had this moment where I was like, oh, wait, what am I doing? He's not me. He's his own person. He's allowed to like wear his belt in whatever way makes him comfortable. Wear his like as long as he's okay and he's dressed appropriately, he doesn't need to do what I want to do or how I need him to be, right? Like when he was a baby, yes, I got to play dress up and like make him look really dapper. But like he gets to wear whatever he wants to wear. He needs to be comfortable. He needs to feel okay in his body. Like and that's something that I don't really feel like I had growing up, right? Because I was like more mask presenting and a tomboy, and that was really, really a problem for my mom, right? And so she really wanted me to be a lot more feminine. And so that was constant conflict. And what it did was cause me to overcorrect, right? Where I just went like full on masculine because I felt like I just needed that because I know when I was here and I was going with her to go do this, I had to be in these clothes that just made me uncomfortable. And so I absolutely love that you give them the space and the freedom to like, for things to just not be okay, for those challenges to exist, to address them, to acknowledge them and to say, hey, it doesn't make you any less valuable or a bad person. It is what it is, right? And then that brings me to the fact that you and I, like I said at the beginning, we have such a parallel experience, right? And yet the outcomes so far have been so different. They couldn't be more different. And here's what I mean when I say that, right? So we have a lot of the same symptoms. Like we have a lot of the same like challenges and a lot of the same struggles, and they might manifest differently, right? Like, maybe I hate the dishes and you hate laundry. I'm just making up arbitrary examples at this point. But the thing that I've noticed and why this like platform and having these conversations is so like important, why advocacy is so important in general, is because I realize that like not everybody has access to the same care. Not everybody has access to the same experts, to the same medical professionals, to the same treatment and options and medication and diagnosis. Like we don't all have the same access to care, not in the US at least. And it has not always been true, but where I am right now, like in terms of like healthcare, it's the best healthcare I've ever had. Like the best team members, like the system that I work within, it's the way that everybody should experience healthcare. Truly, like what I'm experiencing right now is the way that everybody should experience healthcare. If even half of the country experienced healthcare and what I'm experiencing now, if they experienced it the way that I do, people would be way less sick, right? There'd be way less debt. Like, I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm trying to stay focused. We're going to be wrapping up in a second. But my point is, you and I, even two Black women, right? Almost the same age, exactly right. Like we're a few months apart, a lot of the same experiences, very similar parallel backgrounds in terms of like how we grew up, in terms of like, just like growing up middle class, suburbs, then going to school, private university and blah, blah, blah. Like, and then like, yes, there's some divergence just because we're different people, right? But like, despite the like parallel backgrounds and even the parallel experiences now, hearing you share some of the experiences and some of the things that you've experienced at the hands of medical professionals, psychiatrists, therapists, whatever you want to call that person, is just, it's enraging. It's truly enraging. And like, I don't know, like, you know, what your like journey is going to look like in terms of like seeking other additional diagnoses and stuff like that. But like, it was a long process for me, not particularly challenging, because like I said, the healthcare system that I'm working within right now is pretty great, but it was still a long process, right? It wasn't quick. It wasn't make an appointment, ask a few questions, and then be done. It was multiple appointments. It was talking about certain things. It was fill out this questionnaire. It was self-reporting. It was tell me about this about your childhood. It was it was questions and it was answers, and it was this and this, that. And I'm 80 to 100, I would say 80 to like 98% sure that if the person who diagnosed me was not an Afro-Latina, was not a Black woman, that I might not be diagnosed right now. Because like I said, like even I still, with all that I had learned, with all that I thought I knew, with all that I thought that I understood, I still didn't even have the full picture. Not only because there was a lot of stuff that I was suppressing, but I just wasn't able to translate it, right? Like, or see it through that particular cultural lens. And so I think that's why so many women and so many girls and Black people and non-white people end up misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, right? And so if you feel comfortable, I want you to talk a little bit about, like, you don't have to say this explicit diagnosis, you can if you want to, a little bit about like what your journey has been like. With, I know you got misdiagnosed at one point, and then when I started to Google it after you told me your experience, I Googled it and found out, oh, this is actually common as hell. Like, it not only is it common for women to be misdiagnosed, it's common for them to be misdiagnosed with this particular thing, and then later on go get the correct diagnosis, which happens to be some type of neurodivergence, usually autism. Why does this keep happening? Like, what the hell? And before, if you hadn't told me your experience, I didn't know that, but it wasn't until I looked it up after you told me what happened. I don't know. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. And, you know, the whole point of this year was for me to have this level of radical transparency. So I have no problem for sharing my diagnosis, because if somebody can take it and be like, you know what, maybe I should go get a second or third opinion, like do that. But in 2018, I hit a wall, a burnout. And as you know, burnouts as a neurodivergent are very common. And, you know, you're always cautioning me like, hey, are you good? Are you taking care of yourself? You're headed towards burnout. And sometimes it's a little bit like falling down a well and not being able to stop yourself, because it's like, well, the fall has already happened. I just have to wait till I land. And I had started this process of going to seek mental health because I was like, I must be depressed. Like, I'm not myself. I feel like there's so much noise in my head and I can't get it to quiet. Or I'd lay down at night and it's like, I'd be exhausted because, you know, kids. And 2018, I got pregnant with my son. And I was just like, I am miserable and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix me. I was like, I used to be good at this, and just going through the whole process of thinking I was broken. And the first person I met with was like, oh, you know, you're just, depressed. Let's try a bunch of medications. So they throw a bunch of medications at you and you go through a period of feeling like a zombie. And I'm already somebody who has chronic migraines. So adding a bunch of new medications to my regimen is never a good idea, because then it starts to trigger some things. And I'm the kind of person where if one thing's not working, I'm stopping everything. So like, it's a wrap. Like, let's not do anything. And so I just took a break, had my son, and in about a year ago now, I was like, you know what? I really do need to get back into taking care of my mental health and figuring out what's going on with me. And I met with this healthcare provider who diagnosed me as bipolar. She's like, oh, yeah, no, you filled out the questionnaire, you're bipolar. Just like casually, you're bipolar. And I was like, okay, well, she's a professional. I know I should take her word for it. But I don't feel like I could be bipolar, not at least the way I've heard bipolar, you know, described. And, you know, there's more than one type as well. So of course I'm down the rabbit hole. I'm texting you like, hey, this chick thinks I'm bipolar. Like what's going on?
Yeah.
And so then you were like, no, go back to her and ask her, what else could it be? And so we kind of went back down that route. And she was like, okay, well, if the bipolar meds don't work, then you're not bipolar. No, ma'am. That has nothing to do with chemistry or how
we practice medicine.
different people's, you know, liver enzymes metabolize your medications and like all the science behind it. I was like, that's not the truth. So she was just like, okay, well, I told her, I was like, my sister was diagnosed ADHD. Could it be ADHD? And then I guess she checked her notes or checked the symptoms of ADHD because, you know, I don't know why she didn't know, but she was like, yeah, I guess it could be. Let's try you on a low dose of a stimulant. So we tried a low dose of stimulant. The first low dose, I was like, I feel a little bit better, like, but not really. You were like, no, just keep going back, keep asking to change the doses until they get it right. And you told me your story of how like they weren't getting your medications right. And it wasn't that the medication wasn't working. It was that they had the wrong dose. And so we finally got to a dose that one day I took it, and about an hour in, I was like, oh my God, I'm looking around and I'm like, it's so quiet. Why is it so quiet? And it wasn't quiet in the house. It was quiet in my head for like the first time. And I was like, I can focus. I can think. Like, I'm not jumping from 20 different topics, and I felt like glitching in real life. I wasn't doing any of that. I was finally, for the first time, able to think straight.
Yep. Yeah. I remember that. I remember I think I tried 2 before I got to the right medication, and then played with a couple doses before I got to the right dose. And remember, this was after he thought that I had ADHD, and I'm thinking, I don't know, because I was told you have to have these type of symptoms. And again, I was given painted a very specific picture of what ADHD looks like in childhood, and that is not what it looked like in my childhood, right? We know better now that it often looks different for women, girls, Black folks, you know, different culturally. So I'm already a little bit doubtful, and so when the first 2 medications don't work, I'm like, see, this man got this diagnosis wrong. This is not right. And then we got to the right medication and the right dose, and I said, oh, is this? Wait a minute. And I was actually almost pissed first, like, because I had this like light bulb moment, and it literally was only a few moments before I was kind of pissed, because what I realized was that, because this was only a few years ago, right? So what I realized is that I had gone my entire life not realizing, oh, this is how other people's brains work. Y'all's brains are quiet. Wait. You guys can think about one thing at a time. What are we talking? Like, it was just this mind-bending, mind-blowing revelation that I was just like, it really completely shifted my perspective on mental health, on what's possible, and how much race and culture and gender and all these identities that a lot of people don't like to talk about, a lot of people don't like to consider as relevant, important factors. It just reaffirmed how important and relevant those factors are. Right? Because if somebody's not able to see your correct diagnosis because of either implicit bias or because the way that, you know, your situation manifests differently for you because of your gender, your culture, your identity, your upbringing, whatever, your class, your accent, if somebody's not able to see through that lens, you may never get diagnosed, which means you may never get treatment or support or resources or just the understanding, like the confidence that comes with having an official diagnosis. Again, remember, right? Because I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me, right? Oh no, you have a brain type that works very differently, and you have not been given the supports or the accommodations to be successful with your brain type. You've been living and operating in a world that is made for this type of brain, and that ain't the type of brain you have. And so, yes, I've accommodated myself in a lot of other ways, but holy hell, I often wonder how life, not so much anymore, but certainly when that first happened, I often wondered how different my life would be if I had not even actually medication, just support, like the knowledge, the resources, the accommodations, but certainly the medication. I'd say, okay. Okay. And again, I remember this is why I'm like so hell-bent on advocacy, right? Is because of the story that you just described. I'm not saying that like you wouldn't have gotten to where we are now, like were it not for me. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there are some people who don't know to advocate for themselves, who don't know that you can push back against the doctor, who don't know that you don't just have to take what the doctor says firsthand, and not just accepting that initial diagnosis doesn't make you difficult or whatever. Like, you are allowed to doubt doctors, you are allowed to question them, you are allowed to demand other things. Right, respectfully. You are allowed to demand other things, you are allowed to request other things. So if a doctor is saying, oh, this is your diagnosis, okay, well, I need a differential diagnosis, I need other information. What else could it possibly be based on these symptoms? What else? Anyways, I don't need to like rehash it because we just went over it. But a lot of people just don't know that you can do that. That's not only allowed, it's
They
encouraged.
call it practicing medicine for a reason. They're still
For a
learning too.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
all they know for the most part is the generalized, unless they've specialized in something.
Yeah.
And the human body, the human brain, it's so complex. It's
Yeah.
so complex. They're not going to know everything. And
For
I had to
sure, for
remind myself of that too.
I'm grabbing this book. So on our outline, there's a lot of stuff that we're not gonna get to, but I'm okay with that. I always try to overplan so that we have plenty to discuss and not enough. But this, I show this book a lot. It's called Medical Apartheid. I really hope it's not flipped. I don't think it is. But it's called Medical Apartheid. One thing that I know for sure, having the illness that I have, an illness that a chronic illness, a genetic blood disorder that especially here in the US impacts mostly Black people, and I don't want to hear rebuttals about Black people aren't the only ones who can get it. Yeah, I know. Okay. But most of us are Black, right? And so it thrusted me into the world of race and the way that race and culture impacts everything, including the practice of medicine. Right? We know that like the practice of medicine was founded on like so many of our inventions and where we are today, and the information that we know today is because of the experimentation, the non-consensual experimentation that they did on Black women, on brown women, on slaves, enslaved people. And so knowing that is the foundation of our healthcare system, of medical practice here in the US, when people come back and tell me that like it's not a factor today, that race and culture and it's not a factor today, we can't even have a conversation. We can't go past that point because it's not just a factor. It really is like so foundational. And so, and I want to be clear, the fix isn't just getting a Black doctor, getting a Black therapist, getting a woman therapist. That's not the fix, right? One of the more like profound psychiatrists that I had for a short amount of time was a white guy, right? He was one of the first ones to sort of like help me understand, because I used to say like I'm not very competitive at all. Like I'm not a fan of competition. I'm not competitive. And then he had this sort of like checkmate thing where he said, are you not competitive, or are you so competitive that you won't even compete for fear of like losing or not being number one, like not coming out on top? Not being successful, essentially. And again, not even compared to other people, like meeting my own standards. And that's really what it was. And I had this light bulb moment, right? And he was able to see that. Now, mind you, I grew up in the Bay Area, so it's gonna be a little bit different in the South, right? But Bay Area tends to be a little bit more progressive and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, but it was a white male psychiatrist who was really able to like see through the lens of like my own like cultural background and identity, and kind of see how that factored into the standards that I had for myself, the expectations that I had, but also the standards and expectations that my mom had of me, knowing that I was a Black girl and a Black woman and was going to be trying to navigate the world in such a way. And so having these much, much higher expectations and standards for me than maybe the average person, because she knew I needed to be like twice exceptional to get half as much, right? Like he even knew that, like he even understood that. And so again, I just want to be clear, like the fix is, if it was that easy, bruh, I'd be out here campaigning to just be sending Black people and Latina people and Asian people, sending them to therapy school or medical school left and right. If that was the fix, the same way like having Black police officers isn't the problem, the fix to solving the issues with policing, right? We're not going there. But my point is, representation alone is not the answer. It's not the fix, right? It's the learning, it's the knowledge, it's the experience, it's understanding implicit bias, all of these things. It's understanding that like if a man came and said the very same things that you said, instead of bipolar, maybe he gets this diagnosis instead, right? But our own implicit bias sort of like plays into that and sort of leads us to one thing over another. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that experience, because I'm really I think it's important to see like sort of that play out in real life, and like how you can push back in ways that of course are respectful and helpful. Okay, so a couple things. Talk to me a little bit about, we're going to wrap up in a second. Where are you going from here? And I think we'll probably have like another part of this conversation, because I would love for us to just like check out some videos and kind of respond to them. Because of course, remember how we were like, I was like, oh, I wish I had some clips that we could sort of like react to and blah, blah, blah. And I do have some. I have a playlist. But of course, a video that would have been perfect for us to react to today. I found it about 40 minutes before we went live. So I was like, I didn't have time to like go and do the timestamps, and I didn't want us to just watch a 40-minute video. But where do you want to go from here? Right. I know that like, you know, as a parent, as you know, like somebody with a family, but also like an entrepreneur, like I know you have your own goals and dreams, but you also have to be mindful of like how your decisions and choices impact the young ones, right? Like your kids, and like which I totally respect, because like if it was up to me, I would just like force you to go stay on an island for a week and recharge, right? Like, but that's not reality. That's not life. Like I know you don't get to just like vanish and poof, go self-care time. This is great. Or you know what? We're gonna stop everything else, and I'm just gonna focus on finding the most accurate diagnosis, making sure my diagnoses are accurate, making sure I'm on the right medication, making sure that, because you even had issues accessing medication, right? Like you've even had issues maintaining your prescription consistently. I remember there was a point where I had to get drug tested to get certain medications, which I absolutely hate and feel is, I'm not going to go there because that'll be a whole nother conversation.
Nope.
But
Yep.
my point is, it can be challenging, right? I experienced a ton of, one of the reasons I'm in the process of getting off of one of my medications is not because the medication doesn't work. It's not because it's harmful. It's not because it actually works very well. It is the most efficient, but I nearly have an anxiety attack every time I have to go refill it. Every time I have to go to the pharmacy and deal with the pharmacist, I don't know which one's there. I don't know, you know, I have to be mindful of their perception and their assumptions, and I just don't want to deal with it, right? So there's that whole aspect as well. But where are you going from here? What are your goals? What are you hoping for? And who do I have to fight? No, I'm just kidding. But what are you looking for, or what are you hoping for in terms of like, are you still pursuing particular diagnoses, like an autism diagnosis? Are you like, I'm cool being self-diagnosed? Because self-diagnosis is valid for all of the reasons we just mentioned, and because of the fact that we don't all have the same access to care. But are you going to go with trying to get an official diagnosis? Are you going to try to seek more? Are you going to try the medication? Where do you go from here? What are the goals? What's the plan?
Well, my most immediate goal is going to be to go downstairs and take this itchy ass sweater off, because like I'm having sensory issues.
Why do you have on the damn sweater?
Because so I put it on, and when I touch it, like with my hands, it's good, it's soft, but on my skin, another story. And I spilled something on the sweater.
I don't know if I hate it or love it, but my bad, I just cut you off a little bit. I have like a sensory thing, like with my hand, like that is probably the most like sensitive of my like sensory things, is like when I feel my hands, right? So I'm all like constantly rubbing my ear, I'm constantly rubbing this. It's like very self-soothing, right? And my body is like very different. So like the fabric can feel amazing on my hands and horrific on my body, right? I don't know. I didn't realize that was for other people. I'm still sort of like learning and figuring all this stuff out.
Remember, I told you when I came out there, I brought my own sheets because I was like super sensitive to sensory issues. But as far as like, where do we go from here? If I'm going to seek an official diagnosis for anything other than the ADHD and stuff like that, to be honest, I don't know that it would help my situation currently, because we're very much in the process of empire building and leaving legacy. And part of that is me being able to get more life insurance and being able to leave a legacy for my kids. And unfortunately, a lot of my carriers that we work with will not, they won't cover autism, or they will, but it depends on the type of autism. It depends on the degree that you have autism. And so it's one of those things where I'm happy that I've kind of found my people and a community of people who can support me, advocate for me, also be a mirror so that I see certain things and the self-diagnoses. But as far as an official diagnosis, probably not. Probably not. And I'm really even hesitating with getting the kids officially diagnosed, my younger two, just because some of the things we talked about as far as like limitations to move to certain countries and yeah, just it doesn't feel like it's going to play in our favor with getting an official diagnosis.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Something we didn't get to touch on, but I'm glad you brought up the life insurance thing, because that's really what I kind of want us to end on, and one of the reasons I asked that question, like, what are your goals? Because there are a ton of social and social implications and systemic challenges that come with being officially diagnosed, right? It's another of many reasons why I will always say self-diagnosis is valid. The factor of the matter is that most people who self-diagnose spend months and months, sometimes years, going over and asking questions and learning, and like they are more diligent and more thorough a lot of times than practitioners. What they don't always have is like the education, right, of like the background of how some of these things can like look differently or whatever. But that again is why they often spend so long going through the process of self-diagnosis. Very few people are like, oh, I saw that TikTok. Yep, that's me. Got it. Self-diagnosed. Like I think that's what people think. That's not how it works. It's just like, I think people like think kids wake up and go, I'm trans. And then the parents go, oh, wow, let's go get your genitals cut off. That's not how that works. I don't know why that was my example just now, but I think it's because of the video that I saw right before this. But like people just, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how things work in general. It is in the US especially. And so again, there are a lot of social implications and challenges that come with it. You mentioned the immigration. There are certain countries you cannot immigrate to if you have this on your official records. And for those who don't know, when you are, I just want to be brief about this. When you are diagnosed, let me go back. When you see your medical professional, when you see your medical practitioner, if you're using insurance, the way that they get paid is by submitting a billing code, a diagnosis code, it's called a diagnostic code, to your insurance company. And then your insurance company pays them for that thing, right? So they have to put something down. They can't just say, we had a pleasant 30-minute conversation. It was very enlightening. Pay me, right? They have to submit a diagnostic code, which is a quote unquote diagnosis. So, and that diagnosis might be melancholy. It might be depression, whatever. It's very complex and whatever. You can go to school literally for medical and billing and coding. My point is this. Once you go to a professional and you are diagnosed and they start writing stuff down on paper and they need to get paid from your insurance, that is officially in the system. Now it is officially attached to your name, either via your insurance company or wherever. It's documented somewhere. You better believe that. And so I remember when I got my diagnosis, one of the very first things she asked after dropping that bombshell on me was, do you want to make this official? Do you want me to put this in your chart and your medical records and have insurance see it? Or do you want this to just be something that you know? I will say whatever you choose, and this is for anybody, that's up to you. There are a number of reasons that I wanted mine officially a part of my chart. I don't plan on like moving away from the US for a number of reasons, not because I love it here, but also because there are resources and support that and accommodations that I am privy to, that I can get, that I can access, that I qualify for now that I didn't before, and also because I end up in the hospital a lot. And so part of the reason that it's a long story, but it is helpful for me is the point. And so I completely understand, not wanting to do that or wanting to go a different route. It can actually be dangerous. We're now talking about RFK, talking about having a registry for autistic folks and this whole vaccine mess. We didn't even touch on that today because that is a whole world unto itself. That's why I said we're going to have a follow-up conversation or something, because we did cover a lot, but totally understand that. Totally get that. Totally appreciate you. I don't know why I'm saying totally so much. But I appreciate you being here, having this conversation, suffering through the itchy sweater, me suffering through this heat here in SoCal, because no fans, got to keep the windows and doors closed because ambient noise, whatever. But I appreciate it. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? Maybe we can even talk a little bit more how like life insurance works when you come back, because I know you got to get out of here. But because we've talked about that a little bit, but I know, as you know, like I didn't qualify for life insurance anyway because of my sickle cell, and then that was whatever. But anything you want to touch on? Anything last thing you want to say? Not last words. That sounds real ominous, but
I know it does sound a little bit ominous because
yeah.
No, I would just say that I really actually appreciate the opportunity to even just share a little bit of it, because it's helping me even become more comfortable with my own diagnosis, with being completely unmasked this year and just trying to walk in authenticity of who we are.
Yep.
And not be so worried about what the rest of the world thinks.
Yep.
Because the way I look at neurodivergence is it's like a prism. Everybody has their own unique prism, and it's the way that you see, feel, process, and experience the world around you. And it's gonna look different for everyone, but ours is extra colorful. And
I love that.
I don't know. I'm just so grateful for my mind and my spiciness and because I love the way it works when the puzzle pieces click into place, and when the vision comes to fruition, or when certain things that you're like, I knew that if I connected this one to this one, that all of a sudden we'd have this beautiful chemical reaction, and it would create this brilliant piece of art. However that works for you. Like, I just absolutely love us, you know?
Yeah. You know what? I think that's a wonderful, perfect note to end on, because I think that's something that I absolutely needed to hear. I feel like I'm having a reverse process, right? Where I really kind of celebrated the strengths that came with my brain type, not knowing that that was why I had them, but knowing that there were certain things I got praised for growing up, and certain things that brought me success, and certain things that I realized pretty early on were strengths, and then not having answers for the challenges. And so as a result, just being like, those are bad, those are wrong, must suppress. No. And so now trying to have more understanding for the challenges, and then therefore have more grace for myself and more patience. And I'm trying to get where you're at right there. And I'm working on it, and I'm really grateful that not only like are you in my life, but that you constantly are showing up in ways that I wish everybody had in their life, right? Like I wish everybody had the kind of friend that you are, and the way that you just show up and hold space. And there's a lot that I appreciate about our friendship.
No, ma'am, you don't get to praise me, because you have been the kind of friend that sees me. And I think that's something special about the lens that you see the world, is you pay attention and you're intentional in your friendship. So absolutely, like the feeling is mutual. I love you too.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, I love you and appreciate it. And I just find it interesting because we started off the conversation and I asked, I don't know if you remember, I said, did we meet before or after I pledged? And for those of you who don't know, I did pledge a sorority when I was in college. We all make mistakes, okay? And it was after, but I think it was also after I had like been disillusioned, because the main reason I pledged was for like the sisterhood, and like really wanting the Black female friends, and like really wanting what I saw my mom have growing up. And I thought, this is I'm gonna get that. And then I didn't get it, and that was really, really hard. It was there was a lot of trauma with that experience, and like the hazing, and it was really bad, horrific experience. And even just a few years ago, when I was asking what was wrong with me, I never thought I'd be here today. So I have far fewer friends now, but the friendships that I have are so much more like the quality of the friendship and what they bring to my life and what they offer me. Like, I don't know that I would be, I couldn't survive without my friends, right? Like I would just be somewhere in a trance, like rocking in the corner, like not living life. And so thank you for being here. We will have to do this again sometime soon, and tell the young ones I said hello, and there are more goodies on the way. But
Absolutely.
Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
For sure. All right. So y'all, I'm going to wrap it up right here. Oh, that's kind of what is happening, right? Oh, what is going on with my anyways, y'all, I'm gonna get out of here. I don't want this to be too much longer. I really appreciate y'all checking out this video. Most of our interviews and conversations are going to be live, because I don't like editing and I don't want to edit. And so we're going to be doing more live streams and doing more casual stuff and having more conversations like this, and talking about advocacy and having conversations with advocates in different areas and different industries and different fields and different age groups and generations. Really season 2 is focusing on advocacy. That's what we're doing this year. And as far as the schedule, you'll get it when you get it. Like, you know, when folks are well and available and healthy and feel like doing it. And so yeah, we'll be back for more real soon. Appreciate y'all for being here. Black and Sick, where we explore the intersections of culture and faith and everything else. Peace, y'all.